Hey class, Professor Z. Just want to walk you through week 4. So I'm going to start in English 101, and you can see I have the last 3 modules minimized, and I'm going to come down and scroll to week 4, and I'm going to start with the overview. So, the overview is going to tell you about everything that's here. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of this stuff. And I also just wanted to point out, I stopped including the links in the overview page. Um, just because I thought some of you might be like kind of clicking on stuff and then kind of like disappearing into the wilderness a little bit and not kind of like going through the progression. So this still kind of lists out what you should do and has it in order, and then you can kind of walk through the module. So here's what you need to do this week. We're going to be finishing up your first paper and starting to move in the direction of the second paper. Not doing very much for the second paper. We're going to be reading chapter 8 of Gladwell, which you're also going to use in English 108. But largely your work this week is going to be to revise that first paper and get that submitted. That's going to be your English 101 work. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is do some more studying in They Say, I Say. So you're going to do chapter 4 and chapter 8. These chapters are pretty quick. It's not a crazy amount of reading. The first 3 chapters were about how to do the they say, how to summarize what others are saying, and chapter 4 is going to talk about a little bit more about the I say. So that might help you, when you're revising your paper to think about. And then chapter 8 talks about flow in your paper and is going to give you like some. It's going to talk about transition words and other ways to make your paper kind of flow. So those should be helpful for the first paper and all your work in the class. Then we're going to do chapter 8 of Outliers, which is going to be used for your second essay, but it's also going to be used for your take-home exam that you're going to do this week for English 108, which I'll talk about in a minute. So your writing tasks for the week is get essay 1 revised and submitted. Okay, so you should get some feedback from your peers this week. I believe I set the due date for Monday. And you're going to take that feedback into consideration as you revise. You may find some of it really helpful, some of it you may not agree with. You do what you see fit with it. And then I've also, just to keep things challenging, I've added a revision task. So now that we've read chapter 2 of Outliers, which was the chapter titled The 10,000 Hour Rule, I'm asking you to integrate the ideas from chapter 2 into what you've already written in your paper. So I say, I'm asking you to integrate a quote from Gladwell's 10,000 Hour Rule into your paper. This is essentially like a synthesis task, which is like a pretty important skill where you're taking information from multiple sources and putting them together and synthesizing them. So I want to see if you can take the ideas from chapter 2 and incorporate them into what you've already written and thought about in regards to chapter 1. And then the other stuff here, how to proofread, there's some information about how to do some proofreading and just some techniques to help you with that. And then there's a small paraphrasing activity. Paraphrasing, we've been doing that with our annotations, where in the margins we're putting main ideas into our own words. And in this paper, I've asked you to do quotation, but another way that you can incorporate textual evidence is to, instead of quoting, you can paraphrase. In either case, you are going to cite. A lot of times students think, oh, if I paraphrase, I don't need to cite it. You still need to cite it because it's somebody else's idea. But it's a really important skill. And a lot of times in order not to like break up the flow of your paper, you may choose to paraphrase instead of quoting. A lot of times you'll want to quote when, say, somebody like Gladwell has put something very powerfully that you want to capture and then you want to like discuss. But a lot of times you can just take information and put it into your own words and still cite it because it's somebody else's work. So this exercise is going to talk about that. And then I'm just going to ask you to start to think about the second essay assignment. So, and you might want to take a look at that before you read chapter 8 of Outliers, just so you have it in mind as you're doing the reading. Okay. And there is a short quiz on the 2 They Say, I Say chapters. So make sure you're understanding them. It's a way to kind of self-test. And then I'm not going to have a discussion forum this week. I think you have plenty to do. So I want to keep you focused on the important tasks here. Okay, so that's 101. And then just really quick, I'll take a look at 108, which you only have one thing to do in 108. Let me just get this into student view for you. Okay, so I'm just going to minimize my earlier weeks. And then for week 4, you'll see there's an overview, but really the overview is just going to tell you you have to do the chapter 8 reading exam. So just a little bit about the exam. It's a open note, open book exam. Okay, my exams are always like that. And you know, I'm not trying to trick you or get. I want you to do well in the exam. I want you to practice the things that we've been doing. So you know, read and annotate chapter 8 of Gladwell. And as you're reading, you know, like you're identifying main ideas, you're looking up words you don't know, you're making connections to either your life or the work you're doing in other classes or that you've already done in our class. Okay. And the exam, I'll just kind of review it with you a little bit. Like I said, open book, open note. You can type it up. You can write it on with pen and paper is fine. Take a picture and upload it. I don't have a preference, and I can read the worst handwriting, so don't like stress out about that. And the exam is here. If you click on Chapter 8 reading exam, you'll get a Microsoft Word document. And if you are having trouble with that, I also copied and pasted it in below. So, you know, the exam has 2 parts. Part 1 is reading comprehension. There are 10 questions, and you'll see I included the paragraph patterns here for your reference because some of the questions are going to ask you to identify the paragraph pattern. And you'll notice sometimes I say, hey, 25 words, right? I want you to keep a lot of your answers short and sweet. So just pay attention to what the directions tell you to do for each question, right? So for example, number 2 says paraphrase the main idea in a paragraph, right? In English 101 this week, you're going to learn a little bit about paraphrase. And we've also been paraphrasing when we annotate, right? But this is a typical question where I say, identify the topic sentence and paragraph pattern of the paragraph in the middle of page 233. And I gave you the first 3 words of the paragraph just to make sure you know which paragraph I'm talking about. And then what I want you to do is tell me what are the first 3 words of the topic sentence, just so you don't have to write out the entire topic sentence. I just say, put the first 3 words. And then identify the paragraph pattern. You can just put the abbreviation. You can just write TSSD or BTSSD. You don't have to write out the entire thing. Okay, so that's why I put the abbreviations in the quotation marks. So anytime I ask you to identify the paragraph pattern, I want you to identify the topic sentence and which pattern the paragraph follows. Okay. And so those there's about 5. There are 5 of those questions and 5 other reading comprehension questions. And then in the rest of the exam, 1 is about the academic disciplines, which we talked about earlier this semester. So I say to list the disciplines and subcategories that Malcolm Gladwell relies on for evidence. So, you know, to answer this question, pay attention to the experts that he quotes from or cites. And so you might write, for example, say he says, like, according to the psychologist, blah, 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 right? You would say, oh, okay, psychology is a discipline or is a subcategory really of it's a social science discipline, right? So remember when we talked about social sciences, humanities, the natural sciences, formal sciences, and applied sciences, right? So you're going to pick one of those 5 as the large grouping, and then the particular discipline would be what would follow it, right? So, oh, okay, he quoted an engineer, so that's an applied science, and I put engineer, okay? So just list everything that Gladwell uses in the chapter. I'm just trying to get you kind of sensitive to, you know, knowledge and where it's coming from and how it's being used by writers. And then for annotation, I'm saying, along with your exam, photo or a file of your best page of annotation, okay? And this reminds you of what good annotations look like. And then the last 2 things I'm asking you to do is 1, much like the assignment I had you do, I believe it was week 2, where you created a visual organizer or Cornell Notes. I'm asking you to do the same thing with chapter 8, and same deal. It can be a picture, it can be a document, however you can get it uploaded, fine with me. And then last thing you have to do is summarize the chapter, okay? And I say begin with a 1-sentence summary of the main idea. That includes the author, the book title, and chapter number. And then from there, identify the reasons and evidence that Gladwell provides to support his claim and use at least one quotation sandwich, right? And I say approximately 200 words, 11 sentences. I'm not counting the sentences, I'm not counting the words, I'm just giving you a rough idea. If you come in a little below that, perfectly fine. A little above it, perfectly fine. If you go to 300 words, you may have gone too far. I might want you to be more concise. If you only have 50 words, you probably need a little bit more detail. So I'm just trying to give you a rough idea of how long I think it will take. Okay. So, getting the first paper done this week, doing this exam, working with chapter 8 of Outliers, learning a little bit more about I say in They Say I Say. That's the kind of work we're doing this week. The next few weeks, we'll be working on the second paper. And before you know it, we're going to be midway through the semester. Week 7, we're going to do conferences. So I'll do individual conferences on Zoom with everyone. There'll be like a sign up for that. I'll make times available morning, day, and night so that everybody can find a time that works for them. And that's where we're heading. So the semester moves fast. Remember, you can always email me, you can call me, you can shoot me an email and say, hey, I want to meet on Zoom. And I hope you guys have a good week, and we will see each other online.